The email arrived at 11:23 p.m. on a Tuesday. Subject line, "You have 48 hours." No signature, but the sender's address belonged to one of the most powerful tech companies in the world. Inside, a single paragraph that made Piers Morgan's blood run cold. "Cancel the investigation or face the consequences. I have recordings that will destroy your career, your marriage, and everyone you care about. This isn't a bluff." The message came from someone who'd built an empire worth $180 billion. Someone who had world leaders on speed dial and governments in their pocket. Someone who'd never been told no in their entire adult life. Until now. For 3 months, Piers had been investigating allegations that this tech titan had been using their platforms to manipulate elections, destroy competitors, and silence critics through illegal surveillance. The evidence was damning. The sources were credible. The story was ready to run. But then came the email. And 12 hours later, a package arrived at Piers Morgan's home containing a USB drive and a note. "Press play if you want to know what I know about you." Most journalists would have called security. Most would have gone to the authorities. Most would have backed down. Piers Morgan invited them to appear live on his show instead. What happened next was the most dangerous interview of Piers Morgan's career. Because by the end of it, both men realized that only one of them would walk away with their reputation intact. The studio felt different that night. Security had been tripled. The guests' legal team arrived 2 hours early with equipment to sweep for surveillance devices. Even the camera operators had been required to sign additional non-disclosure agreements. But none of that prepared anyone for what walked through the door at 8 p.m. At first glance, the tech billionaire looked ordinary. Average height, unremarkable clothes, the kind of person you'd walk past on the street without a second thought. But the eyes told a different story. They were calculating, predatory, the eyes of someone who'd built an empire by collecting other people's secrets. "Mr. Morgan," they said, settling into the guest chair with unsettling calm. "I have to say, I'm impressed. Most people would have taken the hint." Piers studied his guest carefully. "I don't respond well to threats." "Oh, that wasn't a threat. Threats are what come next if you insist on continuing this charade." The billionaire reached into a briefcase, pulling out a tablet computer. "Before we begin this little performance, I want you to understand exactly what you're dealing with." They turned the screen toward Piers. On it, a video feed showed his own home, live, from multiple angles. His wife in the kitchen, his children in their bedrooms, his mother visiting in the guest room. Impressive, isn't it? Facial recognition software tied to city surveillance networks, traffic cameras, doorbell cameras, security systems. Once you're in the system, privacy becomes a rather quaint concept. Piers felt a chill run down his spine, but kept his voice steady. "Is that supposed to intimidate me?" "It's supposed to educate you about power, about what happens when journalism decides to take on technology without understanding the rules of the game." But Piers hadn't spent 30 years in investigative journalism without learning how to spot a bluff. And something about this display felt too theatrical, too perfectly timed. "Interesting theater," Piers said, reaching for his own folder. "But let's talk about why you're really here. Let's talk about the Senate testimony you gave 6 months ago." "I've given several testimonies. The one where you swore under oath that your platforms don't engage in political manipulation. Where you looked senators in the eye and said your algorithms are politically neutral." The billionaire's expression didn't change, but their fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the tablet. "Our algorithms are designed to maximize user engagement, politics is irrelevant to that goal. Really? Then explain this. Piers pulled out a printed email chain, marked with classified headers. Internal communications from your engineering team. Quote, suppression protocols activated for conservative content during election cycle. Boost progressive narratives as directed. Timeline, 72 hours pre-election through vote certification. Where did you get those? Does it matter? What matters is that you lied under oath to Congress. Those communications are taken out of context. Are they? Because there are 17 more pages of similar instructions. Specific accounts to shadow ban, specific hashtags to suppress, specific news articles to deprioritize in search results. For the first time, the billionaire's composure cracked slightly. You have no idea the complexity of managing information flow to billions of users. I have no idea how you sleep at night knowing you've weaponized information itself. Every media platform in history has had editorial discretion. We're no different. You're completely different. When a newspaper chooses what to publish, people know it's a newspaper with editors and opinions. When you manipulate what billions of people see without them knowing it's being manipulated, that's not editorial discretion. That's mass psychological manipulation. The billionaire stood up, pacing to the window. You think you're some kind of truth-telling hero, don't you, Piers? Some crusader for transparency and democracy? I think I'm a journalist doing my job. Your job? Let me tell you about your job. The billionaire returned to their chair, pulling up another file on the tablet. Your job is to ask questions that your audience wants answered, while avoiding questions that might hurt your access to powerful people. Your job is to create the illusion of accountability while protecting the system that feeds you. And what would you know about my job? I know that in 2019, you killed a story about pharmaceutical company influence in government health policies because 3 of your major sponsors threatened to pull their advertising. Piers felt his stomach drop. That story had been buried so deep that only 5 people knew about it. That's not. I know that in 2021 you edited an interview with a tech industry whistleblower to remove the parts that implicated companies that advertise on your network. How could you possibly? I know that last month, you accepted a $2.3 million speaking fee from a financial services company that's currently under investigation by the very regulatory body you've been critical of. Each revelation hit like a physical blow. Information that should have been impossible for anyone outside his immediate circle to know. Where are you getting this information? The same place I get all information, Piers. From the digital exhaust that every human being produces every minute of every day. Email metadata, financial, transactions, location data, conversation patterns, search histories. You've been living in a glass house for years without realizing the walls were transparent. That's illegal surveillance? Is it? You agreed to terms of service on dozens of platforms. You clicked accept on privacy policies that explicitly grant access to data for business intelligence and security purposes. Nothing I've done violates any law or agreement. You're using data for purposes it was never intended for. I'm using data for exactly the purposes it was collected for. The problem isn't that I have this information, Piers. The problem is that you never bothered to understand what you were agreeing to when you decided to live in the digital world. Piers realized he was facing something unprecedented in his career. Not just a powerful person trying to avoid accountability, but someone who had turned information itself into a weapon. So this is your strategy? Mutual assured destruction? You expose my compromises, and I drop the investigation into your lies? This is my reality check. You want to play investigative journalist with me? Then understand that in the modern world, everyone has secrets and I have access to all of them. Including your own? I don't have secrets, Piers. I have truths that other people aren't ready to hear. Such as the fact that democracy, as you understand it, is a quaint fiction. People don't make informed decisions based on facts and reasoned debate. They make emotional decisions based on curated information feeds designed to reinforce their existing beliefs. And you think that justifies manipulating those feeds? I think it acknowledges reality. Someone is going to curate the information. Someone is going to decide what billions of people see first, second, and third when they open their devices. The question isn't whether that should happen. The question is whether it should be done by people who understand the responsibility. And you believe you understand that responsibility? I believe I understand that responsibility better than politicians who can barely operate their phones, journalists who don't understand the technology they critique, or users who want the benefits of connection without the costs of transparency. Piers leaned back, studying his guest. You really believe you're saving democracy by destroying it? I believe I'm evolving democracy into something that can actually function in the 21st century. By deciding what information people get to see? By ensuring that the information people see serves the greater good rather than the loudest voice or the highest bidder. And who determines what serves the greater good? People with the intelligence to understand complex systems and the power to implement solutions at scale. People like you. People like me. This was the moment Piers realized he wasn't just interviewing a tech executive trying to avoid accountability. He was facing someone who genuinely believed they had evolved beyond traditional concepts of democratic oversight. Let me ask you something, Piers said. Do you believe you're accountable to anyone? Congress? Regulatory bodies? The public? I'm accountable to results. And the results speak for themselves. What results? Stable markets, reduced political violence, increased social cohesion. The information ecosystem I've created has prevented more conflicts than it's caused. According to who? According to data, according to measurable outcomes, according to the mathematical models that predict social behavior with 93% accuracy. But not according to the people whose information consumption you're manipulating without their knowledge. The people whose information consumption I'm optimizing for their own well-being and the well-being of society. You really don't see the problem with that statement? I see the problem with the alternative. Chaos, disinformation, democracy collapsing under the weight of information warfare conducted by bad actors who don't share my scruples. Your scruples? You mean the scruples that led you to lie to Congress under oath? I mean the scruples that led me to prevent the collapse of democratic institutions during the most dangerous period in modern history. By subverting those same democratic institutions? By saving them from themselves? Piers pulled out another document. Let's talk about specific cases. The 2024 election. You personally intervened to suppress information about voter fraud allegations. I suppressed disinformation that was designed to undermine confidence in democratic processes. Who determined it was disinformation? My team of experts. Experts who were never elected, never confirmed by any democratic process, never accountable to any oversight body. Experts who were qualified by education, experience, and track record rather than popularity contests. You mean experts who were chosen by you to implement your vision of what information people should be allowed to see. I mean experts who understand the difference between information and propaganda. And you believe you have the right to make that determination for billions of people? I believe I have the responsibility to make that determination for the good of civilization. Even if it means lying to elected representatives? Even if it means protecting elected representatives from making decisions based on incomplete information. Incomplete according to whom? Incomplete according to the full data set that only my platforms have access to. Piers felt like he was arguing with someone from a different century. Do you understand that what you're describing is authoritarianism? I understand that what I'm describing is the only practical way to manage information at scale in the 21st century. And if people disagree with your management, then they're free to disconnect from the digital world entirely. That's not realistic, and you know it. Then they're free to accept that connection comes with curation. Without transparency about that curation, transparency would undermine the effectiveness of the curation. Effectiveness at what? At maintaining social stability. Piers reached for what he hoped would be his most damaging piece of evidence. Let's talk about Dr. Sarah Chen. The billionaire's expression changed for the first time in the interview. Not fear exactly, but recognition that they'd entered dangerous territory. I'm not familiar with that name. She was a research scientist at Stanford, expert in algorithmic bias. She discovered that your platforms were systematically suppressing content from minority-owned businesses. We've investigated bias claims extensively. Our algorithms are continuously audited for fairness. She had proof, specific examples, data sets showing clear patterns of discrimination. And where is Dr. Chen now? She's dead. I'm sorry to hear that. She died in a car accident 2 weeks before she was scheduled to testify before the Federal Trade Commission about your platform's discriminatory practices. Accidents happen, Piers. Do they? Because I've found 7 other researchers who've discovered problems with your platforms. 3 have died in accidents. 2 have had their research funding pulled. 1 has been discredited by a manufactured scandal. 1 has simply disappeared. You're suggesting I'm responsible for a researcher's traffic accident? I'm suggesting that's a remarkable pattern of coincidences. I'm suggesting that people who build careers on attacking successful companies sometimes face professional and personal consequences. Professional consequences like having their brake lines cut. I wouldn't know anything about that. Wouldn't you? Because I have testimony from a private investigator who says you hired him to conduct surveillance on Dr. Chen for 6 months before her death. The billionaire was quiet for almost a minute. When they spoke again, their voice was different, colder, more mechanical. Dr. Chen was researching proprietary systems. Corporate espionage is a serious threat. Surveillance of potential bad actors is a standard security protocol. Bad actors? She was an academic researcher. Academic researchers can be compromised by competitive interests. And that justified having her followed? That justified gathering intelligence about potential threats to intellectual property. Threats serious enough to eliminate? Threats serious enough to monitor. Until they stopped being threats. Until they stopped being relevant. Piers realized he'd just heard as close to a confession as he was likely to get. But pushing further might end the interview entirely. Let me ask you something different. Do you sleep well at night? The question seemed to catch the billionaire off guard. What? Do you sleep well, knowing what you know, having done what you've done? I sleep like someone who's prevented more suffering than I've caused. How do you calculate that? The same way you calculate whether chemotherapy is worth the side effects. Sometimes saving the patient requires accepting short-term damage. And you see yourself as the doctor? I see myself as someone with access to information and tools that others don't have. And that gives you the right to make life and death decisions? It gives me the responsibility to make decisions that others are incapable of making. Incapable, uninformed, emotional, short-sighted, compromised by special interests. Unlike you. Unlike anyone who doesn't have access to the complete data set. You really believe you're the only person qualified to manage human information consumption. I believe I'm currently the person best equipped to manage it. That may change in the future. When someone more qualified comes along, when someone with better data and better tools emerges. And until then, you'll continue manipulating what billions of people see and hear without their knowledge. I'll continue optimizing information flow for maximum social benefit. Even if that optimization includes eliminating people who threaten your control. Even if that optimization includes neutralizing threats to social stability. Dr. Sarah Chen was a threat to social stability. Dr. Sarah Chen was a threat to the systems that maintain social stability. Your systems. The systems. And threats to your systems deserve to be neutralized. Threats to civilization deserve to be managed. Piers realized that he'd just conducted the most disturbing interview of his career. Not because the guest was evil, exactly, but because they genuinely believed they were saving the world by controlling it. Final question, Piers said. What happens to me after this interview airs? The billionaire smiled for the first time all evening. That depends on how you edit it. I don't edit my interviews. Everyone edits their interviews, Piers. The question is whether you edit it to focus on the sensational accusations you can't prove, or whether you edit it to focus on the important conversation we just had about information management in the digital age. And if I choose the accusations, then you'll discover that living in a glass house has consequences. Such as every compromise you've ever made becoming public knowledge. Such as every secret you've ever kept being exposed to the people it would hurt most. Such as learning what it feels like when information becomes a weapon pointed at you. And if I choose the other option, then you'll have conducted a thoughtful interview about the challenges of information management, and we'll both move on with our lives. That sounds like blackmail. That sounds like a choice. The interview ended there. The cameras stopped rolling. The billionaire packed up their tablet and left without another word. Piers Morgan sat in his chair for 20 minutes after everyone else had gone, staring at the empty studio and trying to process what had just happened. He'd set out to hold a powerful person accountable for lying to Congress and manipulating democratic processes. Instead, he'd discovered that accountability itself might be an outdated concept in a world where information is the ultimate weapon and privacy is the ultimate vulnerability. The question now wasn't whether to air the interview. The question was whether he could afford to air it, and whether he could afford not to.